When given a choice between Quick Draw and Past Noon perk, most of the time you are going to pick the first one, for a very good reason. Ouch. But what about the other perk? Yeah. And that is not the only case where one perk is almost always better than the alternative. So how do we distinguish a good perk from a bad one? And how can we make some of them more viable? Let's find out. If we take Roadhog's minor perks for a second, can you tell me which one of them is a better option? The first one is an obvious choice. If you're shooting Reinhardt's shield and end up breaking it, you're most likely going to end up hooking him towards yourself to start dealing damage. But there's a good chance that you'll end up using all your ammo on destroying his shield, so you cannot actually finish him off. Unless you have his Scrap Hook perk enabled, which then gives you 2 extra ammo to help you out a little bit. Now let's look at the alternative. The uses for this perk are quite limited. Sure, you can throw it at the enemy team, but they'll most likely end up destroying it before it activates. The most common thing to do for Roadhog's trap is to combine it with his hook, by hooking an enemy to your trap and dealing massive amount of damage, usually ending up eliminating the hook target. In other words, the first perk will result in dealing more damage because you'll have more ammo after hooking a target, while the second one is for very niche situations. And if we look at his major perks, then it is no longer obvious which one you should be picking. Both options have their situational uses. You can use the first perk to disengage faster from a fight, or even do the complete opposite, and use it to chase fleeing enemy players. While the second major perk gives you some supportive properties, allowing you to heal your team. So my goal is to make some of the boring perks more interesting. I don't want simple stat boosts like these ones. I want all perks to be viable. So let's go through some of the perks that are not that good, and let's try making them better. Since we just talked about Roadhog, let's start with him. We'll be changing his Hog Toss perk and give him something else. One of his main weaknesses is his mobility. Sometimes there's going to be this Junkrat player just spamming your team from a safe spot, and there's not much you can do about it, unless you want to walk across the whole map to get to him. And sure, some other tank heroes also can't reach him, but they have tools to protect their team, or they have vertical mobility to reach the enemy faster. So what if Roadhog could also have some extra mobility, by using his pick pan as a launch pad? The obvious downside of this perk is that you're sacrificing damage and area control for mobility, in comparison to his other perk, which just gives you more ammo and therefore more damage. And if you combine this with his major perk, then Roadhog becomes something of a budget hazard. Ramattra's minor perks give you a choice between offensive and defensive bonuses. However, the barrier duration is not as impactful as a defensive perk. Here's a comparison of their durations.
I will give you shelter.
As you can see, it's barely any different. So let's shift this perk to his nemesis form. I'm giving Ramattra a perk that essentially takes his block ability and converts percentage of inflicted damage into temporary overhealth that will be applied upon returning to his Omnic form, which will be capped at 200 overhealth. I'm also adding an icon below his crosshair that will indicate how much overhealth is stored for his Omnic form. This perk will allow you to survive just a little bit longer, and you also have to decide how long you want to stay in your block position, because every second in block position is you doing less damage and less pressure to the enemy team. The Short Circuit perk deals 30% more damage to deployable objects, like Torp Turret and enemy barriers. However, in most cases you're not the one focusing on destroying turrets or breaking shields. Winston's job is to dive in, disrupt, and secure kills, not slowly zap barriers. A much more rewarding perk will be one that complements his natural playstyle. Take for example his classic jump, zap, melee combo. This technique saves nearly a full second compared to just zapping an enemy. So, what if we rewarded his playstyle with a perk that resets his jump on a melee kill? This will let you either chain dives more effectively or immediately escape after securing an elimination. As we know by now, the Past Noon perk refunds you 30% of ultimate charge if you allow it to expire, meaning that you are using it more as a zoning ult, forcing the enemy team to take cover for 7 seconds. But let's be real for a second. Whenever you activate your ultimate, there's a good chance that you can get killed, slapped, stunned, hacked, hooked, charged, blocked, consumed, rocked, nuked, use it to reload. deflected, stomped, disconnected, diffed, punched, and a small chance of actually getting a kill. So when you think about it, the chances of every Deadeye fully expiring aren't that high. So instead of letting the enemy run away and hide, let's make it harder for them to escape. By introducing a new perk that gradually slows enemies down whenever they're in Deadeye's line of sight. May's Ice Wall perk increases both its duration and cooldown, which in my opinion is more of a nerf than a buff to her wall. Why, you might ask? Because Ice Wall is relatively easy to break if the enemy team focuses it down. A longer duration doesn't mean much if it just gets destroyed. And yeah, we can probably just slap extra HP to the wall on top of the duration, but that will be kinda boring in my opinion. So instead, let's do something fun. Yep, you guessed it. A perk that allows her and her teammates to move faster by 20% when walking on the ice sprayed floor. This also applies to her ultimate. Junkrat has the exact same perk as Roadhog. His trap gets thrown 50% further. And yes, we can also do the same thing and throw a trap behind the enemy team. But let's be honest, most of the time you're setting it up on a flank route, near your team, or in some sneaky, obscure corner. And in most cases, the enemy team can clearly see them, depending on the trap's placement of course. But what if you could place your trap without it being so visible? With this new perk, Junkrat's trap will now be completely invisible to the enemies. Unless they get close enough to it, at which point it becomes visible. This way, instead of enemies instantly spotting and destroying your trap, they'll have to watch their step more carefully. One of Juno's major perks allows her to headshot enemy players, while the second perk gives her extra mobility. The reason why you should avoid picking the second one is because Juno already has a lot of mobility. You can already reach most of the places with her double jump and glide boosters. A better alternative will be giving Juno a choice between more damage or more healing. If you're not into flashy kills, like this one, then boosting her healing output will make more sense. And the best way to do that is to give Juno's primary fire healing a trait similar to her pulsar torpedoes, adding healing over time effect. And yes, I did say that I don't want to give perks just stat boosts, but for this one, I'm making an exception. And finally, Lucio. Well, there is not much I can say about Lucio to be honest. Almost all of his perks give him more DPS, except this one. So the best thing to do is to get rid of this perk and replace it with another DPS boosting perk. I hope you all like it. Let me know which silly perk ideas you have on your mind, and huge shout out to Mr. Fly Guy for making these changes in the workshop. I'll see you all in the next one.